Everybody, welcome into Sports Talk Chicago. My name's Jon Zaghloul. Great to have you here on Channel 59.3 BPOD TV and Roku. Big show for today. We're going to break down the Bears' win over the Giants, what it means for Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace moving forward. That comes up in just a second. Before we get started, make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jon Z Sports and on Facebook at Jon Zaghloul. If you want to watch more of this show, search up Sports Talk Chicago on YouTube or go to sportstalkchicago.com. If you want to watch other shows from the BPOD TV network, search up BPOD TV on YouTube. I want to start today with this. Sometimes in life, when you make a decision, bad one or good one, you kind of already know what the end result's going to be. If I'm driving 100 miles per hour down the highway, chances are I'm going to be given a ticket. I'm not going to get mad when I'm given one. Should have expected it. Breaking the law, reckless driving, stupidity, going to get a ticket. I knew that. I made a bad decision, and I'm going to pay the price. That's how it works. Sometimes you already know, you have an idea of how things will play out before they even do. That was the Bears game on Sunday. You know, somebody bet me and said, I think the Giants will win. I said, are you crazy? To start Mike Lennon, supposed to be a rotation between Mike Lennon and Jake Fromm. And Fromm was on the sideline warming up, never came in. And the Bears had what turned out to be Andy Dalton. Did you really think the Giants would win? I mean, look, I could have seen it. The Bears were so heavily favored. I could have seen a possibility in which the Giants upset and everybody loses money, but I didn't see it in this game. I really did it. We'll talk about why later, but, you know, this is a winning streak for Matt Nagy. Not to say that he's going to stay, but it's a nice way for him to go out. If you want to complain about the Bears and what they're doing, go to New York. This is nothing, really, compared to what the Giants are facing. They've retained Joe Judge, they've retained Daniel Jones, and most likely their GM's out, but still. Bad coach, bad quarterback. They're worse off than the Bears right now. At least the Bears may have a competent quarterback. They could always bring in somebody new at GM or new at head coach, but at least they could say we have a decent quarterback we're confident in. The Giants don't even have that. It's supposed to be the Mike Lennon revenge game yesterday. Well, Lennon did nothing. Lennon did absolutely nothing. 4 of 11, 24 yards, 2 picks, no touchdowns, a couple of fumbles too. His passer rating was 2.8. His passer rating. Not his QBR, his passer rating even was 2.8. The worst all season. I've never seen a passer rating that low. They could give the Bears defense props, and certainly so. Robert Quinn broke Richard Dent's record. They only gave up 3 points, but look who they're facing. Mike Lennon. Sure, many of you want me to celebrate about this game, and sure, it was a great win. Good defensive stand, 29 points put up. I mean, probably the most complete game the Bears have played all year. I'm happy about that. But I want us to see the bigger picture here. And I'll explain. There have been recent reports that suggest Ryan Pace should stay, or will stay, and Matt Nagy will go. I've seen it in regular Bears media and in some bloggers and YouTubers. A lot of people are clamoring to keep Ryan Pace. Not his fault. Not Nagy's the one who's bad with quarterbacks, not Ryan Pace. He's done nothing. I've seen beat reporters start to defend Ryan Pace. When that happens, there's obviously a reason. If you've got Bears beat reporters covering and defending Ryan Pace, that should be cause for concern. If I'm a fan and I see that, I'd be worried. Because usually what that means is he might stay. I've seen so many puff pieces put out. The do's and don'ts. Why we should or why we shouldn't keep him. Is there a reason, really truly a reason to keep him? Is there a reason to keep Ryan Pace? You could point to some of the signings. You could point to the Khalil Mack trade, maybe some 5th-round picks. But what about the number one position in football? One that's going to win you games and lose them for you, too. We all watched the mediocrity of Mike Lennon, right? We saw what we saw. Numbers don't disprove it either. 4 of 11, 24 yards, 2 picks, no touchdowns. Yeah, that proves it. Pace paid Glennon $45 billion, 18 of which guaranteed. Ryan Pace said, quote, he was fired up about signing Mike Glennon. Huh? Mike Glennon? Fired up? Did those two things belong in the same sentence? That should be a concern. We saw Mike Glennon play. Think about this. They thought Mike Glennon would be good. They paid him $18 million guaranteed, 45 total, to play for the Bears. That's what we saw yesterday. Mike Glennon doesn't even deserve to be in the NFL. There are better players on practice squads. There are better backup quarterbacks who've never gotten an opportunity than Mike Glennon. Pretty much everybody is better than that. And Ryan Pace, the Bears' beloved GM, thought it was a good idea to sign him. And look, I'm all for forgiving people for mistakes. I really am. One mistake shouldn't define your whole career, but this is a pattern with Ryan Pace. The quarterback position is a pattern of wrong with Ryan Pace. Sorry, it is. Between paying Mike Glennon, paying Andy Dalton, paying Nick Foles, taking on that contract from the Jaguars, that's a pattern. If it was one time and it's over, fine. And as much as I like Mitch Trubisky, he's not better than Pat Mahomes or Deshaun Watson. So that's another mistake. That's 3 mistakes, 4 at quarterback. I'm not saying he's not done good for this team. I'm not saying he hasn't made good picks. But what did we say? The quarterback position will win you or lose you football games. And if there's one thing Ryan Pace hasn't gotten right, it's the quarterback. And 2, the head coach. He hired John Fox, and he hired Matt Nagy. Both of them are about to be fired. Fox was fired, and Nagy's going to be fired here in a sec. Got to think about that. I'm almost happy the game played out the way it did yesterday. Really, I am. I mean, the Bears won, fine. I don't really care about that. But what I do care about is Mike Glennon looked horrible. Mike Glennon was exposed yesterday. And therefore, Ryan Pace was too. Ryan Pace signed Mike Glennon to play over Mitch Trubisky. Say what you want about Mitch Trubisky. Is he that bad? Is he to the point of going 4 of 11, 24 yards, 2 picks, no touchdowns? No. We can all agree on that. Ryan Pace thought it'd be a good idea for Mitch Trubisky to learn from Mike Glennon and pay Mike Glennon $18 million guaranteed. We got people here today, respected people, bloggers, YouTubers. Everybody's saying, hey, maybe they should keep Ryan Pace. Let's rethink his candidacy. There's nothing to rethink. Okay, he has to go too. There is nothing to rethink. The top position in the game, he's screwed up multiple times. He's got new chances. Can't even get it right. When your quarterback list of signings includes Mike Glennon, Nick Foles, Andy Dalton, you're through. You're fired. And you drafted Mitch Trubisky over Pat Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. You might have gotten Justin Fields right. To me, too little, too late. Got the coach wrong, too. Wrong coach to coach Justin Fields. I'm all for forgiving mistakes. But this is a pattern. It's not a one-time error. If it was a one-time thing, I'd say, well, whatever. Had a lot of good to offset the bad. The fact is, every single year for the past 5 years, the Bears have had a quarterback problem. Who's that on? Yes, Matt Nagy for not coaching anybody, but the GM for bringing in some of these people. Why are the Bears bringing in Mike Glennon, Nick Foles, Andy Dalton? That's not a Matt Nagy issue. The Bears can't get the quarterback right. And yes, that's Ryan Pace. Again, great scout. Great scout. He found Darnell Mooney, David Montgomery, orchestrated, Khalil Mack. Great defense under Ryan Pace. signings and depth, for sure, but no quarterback. You win games and you lose games with your quarterback. That's it. That's the end-all be-all of the NFL. Why do you think they're paid $40 million? And why do you think people gripe when you talk about paying a running back or a wide receiver? Because at the end of the day, for the most part, 99% of the time, they're all replaceable. The quarterback isn't. Look at Denver this year. Denver just is about to fire Vic Fangio, great defensive coordinator, because they have no quarterback. Great team, great roster, good run game, good defense, good receivers, no quarterback. You're not going to win with Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock. So Vic Fangio's the one who has to go. Not even his fault. But the point is, it's the quarterback. The quarterback is holding the Broncos back, and as a result, Vic Fangio is going to be fired. Different from Matt Nagy. He had Mitch Trubisky, hurt him. He had Justin Fields this year, hurt him. The Bears gave Nagy a chance. They said, hey, you know what? And develop Justin Fields. He's a great prospect. Didn't work. So, yes, Nagy's out the door. That's on him. He's not a quarterback guru. But Ryan Pace brought all these people in. I'll say this about Nagy. Pretty hard to work with Nick Foles, Andy Dalton, Mike Glennon. Pretty hard. Nagy didn't work with Glennon, but John Fox did. Pretty hard if you're a coach and you got Mike Glennon as your starting quarterback. Or if you claim we're fired up about Mike Glennon and he's making $18 million guaranteed and you're playing him over your top draft pick in Mitch Trubisky, and you expect Trubisky to learn from Mike Glennon. I'm sure he has knowledge of the game, don't get me wrong, but I don't see how much you could learn from watching him play. I learned one thing yesterday about Mike Glennon. He shouldn't be in the NFL. That's what I learned. When I watched him play, that's what I learned. Shouldn't be in the NFL. Cannot hold on to the ball. The minute you touch him, ball's loose. Bad decisions, no completions, nothing. This guy has to go. I feel bad for the Giants for even trotting him out there. I mean, that's a joke. But the point is, the Bears signed him. The Bears thought, Ryan Pace thought, this great scout thought, that Mike Glennon would be a good quarterback. When you screw up the quarterback position, like Ryan Pace has, you deserve to go. And that's the main takeaway from the game yesterday. We saw how bad Mike Glennon looked. It made Ryan Pace look even worse. The way that game went, it actually hurt Ryan Pace more than helped him. It did. Made him look like an idiot for even giving this guy money. That's the thing you got to remember. Happy for Robert Quinn. Break the all-time sack record, single season. A lot of people were discouraged. Understandably so. Richard Dent, legend. Bears, legend. But I'm happy to see Quinn play hard. Happy to see him play hard despite what's been a forgettable season. You know, this is a testament to him. He's worked his butt off all year despite the record. Hasn't given up on his team, hasn't given up on himself. Great stuff. I have no issue with it. I understand to some. I saw a couple of comments saying, well, I don't want him to break it. Richard Dent's an all-time Bear. I understand it. I get it. And at this point, Quinn might be gone at the end of the year to save cap space, so it's not ideal. Not an all-time Bear. But I'll give the guy props for breaking the record, doing it in the right amount of games. He'd be different, and I'd have a problem with him doing it in the extra game. That'd be an issue, 100%. I wouldn't really count it at all. I wouldn't count it if he did it in 17 games. But he did it in the proper amount of games. So nothing bad to say there. Happy to see him do it. The Bears' offense played well. It clicked. Andy Dalton did okay, but David Montgomery had a decent game. Ran through a lot of troubles. And the Bears just dominated. And they had the ball the whole time, scored 29 points, held the Giants to 3. Forced a ton of takeaways. It was the best played game for the Bears all year, but remember who they're facing. They're facing the Giants. And next week, they're going to face the Vikings in a meaningless game. Vikings got eliminated yesterday from playoff contention. So it's really a depressing way to end the season for the Bears, really. And even if they do beat the Vikings and they end winning 3 straight, my hope is that nothing changes when it comes to their plan. Matt Nagy, Ryan Pace, they need to go. End of the year next year, need to have a press conference. They're gone. So in a week, there should be a press conference that Monday saying they're both fired. I really do have a sick feeling Ryan Pace is staying. I just have that feeling inside of me. If we're seeing articles written about Ryan Pace, if we see people, respected people, making a case for Ryan Pace to stay, you know something's up. You do. I don't see anyone making a case for Matt Nagy to stay. I don't see articles saying, hey, keep Matt Nagy, or the do's and don'ts, why you should or why you shouldn't. I don't see any of that. For Ryan Pace, I do. I see people 50-50. There is no 50-50. There's no on the fence or maybe or we'll see. Has to go. Screwed up the most important position in football multiple times. Hey, the guy we saw yesterday with 4 completions and 4 turnovers, $18 million. He paid Mike Glennon $18 million guaranteed dollars. And he was, quote, fired up about the move. Fired up about Mike Glennon? Who even says that? Fired up about Mike Glennon. Like, is that even possible? How could you be fired up about somebody like that? He was. And he paid him money, handsomely. And he brought in Nick Foles. And Andy Dalton. And drafted Mitch Trubisky. No, I'm sorry. You're gone. Look, if he wants to be demoted and actually be like the Bears head scout, I'm all for it. Because I trust Ryan Pace when it comes to every other position besides the quarterback. But the fact is, you can't get the quarterback right. You've tried and you've failed multiple times. That's it. You know, it's really hard to be a GM if you can't get the number one position correct. And it's going to be hard for him, I think, to find a job as another GM again. I really do. I don't think it's going to happen. Everybody in the league has seen what he's done to the Bears quarterback position. I don't see him being employed as another GM. Head scout? Sure. Assistant or advisor? Sure. Not a GM. He does not have the capacity to make a quarterback decision. Matt Nagy doesn't have the capacity to work with any quarterback. So both of them, gone. Unless you're looking for an anti-quarterback team, like if you want your running back to be the star, like in Carolina, well, then maybe you hire both of them. They'll make sure to damage your quarterback position and set it back for life. But if you're looking to have a good quarterback, you're looking to play in the 21st century of the NFL, you don't hire these two. You don't. They don't know what they're doing when it comes to quarterbacks. Everything else, fine. Not quarterbacks. Didn't we see what Mike Glennon did yesterday? And it was a joke. It was a joke. I laughed. Everybody laughed at the kind of performance he put up. Why were we laughing, though? Sure, it was funny. It looked horrible. But we're laughing because the Bears actually invested time and money in that quarterback. They thought he'd be good. They thought he'd learn and he'd teach Mitch Trubisky. And he'd work in the system. And that kind of scares me to think about. When we go back to 2017, and the narrative was, hey, he'll teach Mitch Trubisky. He's a good starter for us, and then we'll bridge him and then get to Trubisky. That scares me. It terrifies me. That was the narrative. That's what everybody bought. He'll be a good bridge. This guy couldn't last one snap in the NFL. And he hasn't. So the fact that the Bears and Ryan Pace thought he'd be a good bridge, that tells me all I need to know about whether he should stay or go, and what his future is going to be in the NFL. Seriously. I don't want to be vindictive. I don't want to have a vendetta. He could do what he wants to do. If he finds another job, great. But really, nobody could forget that decision. You brought in Mike Glennon. You paid him $18 million. You drafted Mitch Trubisky over Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. You took on the bulk of Nick Foles' contract from Jacksonville, and you signed Andy Dalton. drafting Justin Fields, who we don't even know if he's going to be great, does not make up for that pattern. It doesn't. You rarely get a second chance in the NFL. Ryan Pace has been here since 2013. I mean, 2013, he's still been here. He was here when Jay Cutler was here. Look at this quote from Adam Johns. Glennon faced Dalton, who took over for Foles, who was acquired to replace Trubisky, whose development in 2017 resulted in the benching of Glennon, who was signed to replace Cutler, who was in Chicago to watch Glennon versus Dalton on the Circle of Life. Did you follow that? Glennon faced Dalton, who took over for Foles, who was acquired to replace Trubisky, whose development in 2017 resulted in the benching of Glennon, who was signed to replace Cutler, who was in Chicago to watch the game. Jay Cutler was there yesterday. That was all Ryan Pace is doing. That whole paragraph I read you. No, doesn't deserve to stay. As for the Bears, they have one more meaningless game left. And my hope is we see a lot of firings after the game. If we don't see that, if Ryan Pace stays here, just expect more mediocre quarterback play. Or worse off, expect problems around the team. The offensive line hasn't been great. The secondary's been horrible. I mean, these are other moves, small ones that have added up over the years. The quarterback is number one, and it's glaring. And because of that, really, only because of what we saw from Mike Glennon yesterday, it's apparent that Ryan Pace needs to go too. Thanks for watching today's show here at BPOD TV, channel 59.3 in Roku. Really appreciate the time. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jon Z Sports and on Facebook at Jon Zaghloul. If you want to watch more of these shows, search up Sports Talk Chicago on YouTube or go to sportstalkchicago.com. Really appreciate the time. Great guests coming up this week. Daniel Moskos, the Cubs assistant pitching coach, Bob Nightingale from USA Today to talk all things baseball. Should be some great stuff. Make sure you're tuning in every night right here at 10:30 on BPOD TV. So long, everyone.